So we're learning now Tanya. Today we're at page Lamed Gimel. We started chapter 26 2 days ago, and yesterday we learned that a person could be mushlam, like complete, could refine himself in machshava dibur maisa, in thought, speech, and action, and additionally properly facilitate their faculties of Chochmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus, the 10 spheres, in a way that makes the person develop a true love and awe for Hashem, which is what the Alter Rebbe taught for 25 chapters. In chapter 26, the Alter Rebbe begins with the word Baram, however. The implication of the word Baram means that there's something that comes from God, from Hashem, kind of unexpected at times, and it interferes with our avodas Hashem, even if we've refined ourselves. And that's what it deals with from chapters 26 through 34, life's issues. And he laid the groundwork that in order to succeed in removing sadness and melancholy and laziness and loneliness and egotism and any and all kinds of maladies that plague a person, you need to be b'simcha. You need to have simcha. Without simcha in your life, your avodas Hashem is going to get stuck. So, of course, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try, but he's giving us kind of the secret. The key to succeeding is to develop simcha in your life. I once mentioned that the Tanya is not a sefer of Musar. For Musar, someone has their thing on, please mute yourself. For Musar, you learn Reishis Chochmah, Chayvus Lavovis, Rabbeinu Yoina, and those Sfarim talk about midos, refining your midos, your character. That's not Tanya. Tanya is a book of Chassidus, a book of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov didn't come to replace Pirkei Avos. It's simply factually wrong. The Baal Shem Tov came to inspire a Yid to know who the Yid is, who the Neshama is, vis-a-vis his teachings of Hasidism. So the Alter Rebbe, who was a Chassid and a Hasidic Rebbe, and one of the lines in the ways of the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov, says the same thing. Nevertheless, this midah of Simcha is the only one that he tackles, and he tackles it for 9 chapters. And why? Because simcha is relevant not just to one particular area in your life, it's relevant to all areas in your life. If you don't have simcha, you have ego. If you don't have simcha, you feel down at times. If you don't have simcha, you feel lonely at times. So that's why, in order to deal with the outside interferences as alluded to by the word Baram on page 64, the first word of chapter 26, which alludes to those outside interferences that disturb us, the Alter Rebbe says, for these issues, which are real, we need Simcha. And today, he's about to continue and finish the first part of the chapter, which is on the third line of Lamed Gimel. And it's the last, umikre, it's the last word on the line, third line. Umikre moli dibur akosov. Alter Rebbe says, we see clearly a clear verse that the Torah says, quote, in Parshas Kisova, I believe, Tachas asher lo yavadat asher Hashem elokecha b'simcha. Since you didn't serve God with simcha, therefore the curses come upon you. But the Alter Rebbe says, "V'noide lakoil," it is known to everyone. Peter Arizal al posik zeh, the Arizal's interpretation. What's going on here? When you learn the pasuk in the Torah, simply speaking, why will there be punishment? Because you didn't serve God. Lo yavadata. The Arizal says, no, you did serve God. You were an avadata. You did serve him. You worked. But you were missing simcha. Your avodah was missing simcha. So even if you serve Hashem in every detail of Yiddishkeit, of Torah, but you're missing simcha, says the Arizal, that's when plagues and maladies and punishments will be upon you. Simply speaking, that's where you'll get messed up. Yoni, please you mute yourself. So now the Alter Rebbe comes and says, what is the solution? Right? We have a problem. Yes, sir, we have a problem. I'm davening and I'm learning and I'm upset about this or that. Let's see what the this or that is, and let's see what his advice is. So let's go. Vehine eitza hayiutza. The word eitza means advice. Hayiutza also means advice. Why the double language? I believe it's a quote from a pasuk. I don't recall now where, or it's based on a pasuk, but more so, it means the advice of all advices. In other words, I'm giving you here very important advice. So the way to express it, you double the word, eitza hayiutza. V'hine eitza hayiutza l'tayir liboy, the advice of all advices, to purify your heart. Mikol otzev, v'nidnu daiga, from any and all iota of anxiety and worries. Mimila da alma, from worldly matters that bother you. And we don't mean that you got a flat tire. Because if you get worried that you had a flat tire, you don't come to the Alter Rebbe for that. It doesn't make any sense, Come on, you're a big boy. So what type of Avram, what type of issues are real worrisome and anxiety ridden that the Alter Rebbe does address? V'afilu, even, let's continue. Banai, chaya u'mezayna, children, health, and sustenance. Those are real. Right? What are the big three? The 3 R's of Yiddishkeit? Shabbos, kashrus, and mikveh, right? For a woman, mikveh, kashrus, Shabbos, keeping Shabbos. We all know, I reflect back to my days in Marin County, the hardest thing I felt was to get someone to keep Shabbos. Kashrus was pretty, was doable. A woman with mikveh, if you explain it well and you have a nice mikveh, it's doable. But to get someone to stop driving and to walk to shul, that was a battle. It was difficult. It wasn't easy because the person doesn't live there. And they want to be part of your shul. And they like you. And you like them. And they like the congregants. They like the congregation. But they live 8 miles away. What do you do then? Oh, I have a bed for you. Come for Shabbos. I'm sorry, my wife's not coming and I want to be home. So Shabbos was always a very difficult thing. But nevertheless, that's real. So too, when it comes to issues of life that are worthy to speak about because they really are troublesome at times and anxiety-ridden and worthy of discussion, the Alter Rebbe says we're talking here about children, issues with our children, chaya, issues with our health, umezayna, issues with our parnasa. These are staples in our life. These aren't luxuries. So if one has daigem emila da alma, in other words, you see the words, chevra, worries, mimila da alma, from worldly matters. Worldly matters can mean, I have to get to to Beit Elite in time, and I don't know if you know what I'm saying, if I'll get there in time, and I'm worried. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not even worthy mentioning. Come on, either get up earlier or whatever. Mila da'alma, daigim and mila da'alma that disturbs you in avodas Hashem are issues that touch upon your children, your health, and your sustenance. So the Alter Rebbe now gives us a recipe, and I want you to know that this is a very, very fancy recipe. Fancy in the sense that it takes a lot. Okay? This recipe is not a segula, say 5 times this, or read the Shalosh Tefillah on Tuesday of Parshas B'Shalach. This isn't the Alter Rebbe. This is a real, fancy, difficult, but important and real recipe. And let's see what he says. It is known to everyone. Maimer Razal, the teaching of the Razal, Gemara and Brachas. Quote, just like you're supposed to make a bracha when something is good. For example, a good wine, a real good wine, you make hatov u'meitiv. Says the Gemara, so too, you have to make a bracha when something bad happens to you. And the bracha is, Baruch Dayin ha'emes, which Rahman al-Islam we say after someone passed away. So the question is, the Gemara seems to imply we should. It's the same, kishem. Just as you make a bracha on what's good, you make a bracha on what's bad. So the Upirush Gemara means the Gemara struggles with this comparison, and the Gemara says you're right. You don't make the same bracha, you make 2 different brachas, but the attitude in making the bracha when something bad happens, which is dayin emes, should be the same attitude when you make a bracha for something that's good, hatayv u'meitiv. And the Gemara expresses that idea in the words lekibuli b'simcha. Just as when you drink a good wine or you make a bracha hatayv u'meitiv, you're happy about it because it's so delicious and so good, so too you should have simcha inside your neshama, inside your being, when you say Baruch Dayin ha'emes, because you truly trust God knows what He's doing. Now, of course, we don't mean this. You should go. This does to contradict the laws of Shiva and mourning. We're talking about an inner content that as much as it hurts, this is God's will. L'kibula b'simcha. That's a Gemara. That's not from the Alter Rebbe. Kimoi simchas hatoiva haniklis vaniris. The simcha that one should have in accepting God's judgment should be like the simcha that one has when something is openly and apparent good. And why? Kigam zulateva. Because this too is good. And everyone knows that quote and all that. Rak, however, she'eina niglis v'niris la'ine bosa. It's gam zulateva. The only thing is, it's not apparent. They're not revealed to the physical flesh, to the physical eyes, and to the eyes. Why not? Because this good comes from what we call me'alma diskasya, from the concealed world, shelamayla, which is greater, me'alma disgalya, the revealed world. In other words, the Alter Rebbe introduces a concept of Kabbalah here. What we see here as bad is really the ultimate of good. But it's too great to come into the world. So it shatters the world. And it's revealed in a way that we perceive as negative. And the Alter Rebbe adds, Shehu Vavke Mishem Havaya Baruch Hu. In the name of Hashem, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, there are 4 letters. So Yud-Kei represents the Yud is Chochmah and Kei is Bina. The Vav is Midos, the 6 Midos, and the last Kei is Malchus. It says in Kabbalah that the first 2 letters of Hashem is representative of the 2 Chochmah, Bina, and in comparison to Midos and Malchus, This is the Alma Diaskasia, the first two letters, because it's concealed, it's hot, it's too great to be revealed in the world. Whereas Vavke is lower. So that's why we say that Yudke is from Alma Diaskasia and Vavke is from Alma Diasgalia. But Alma Diaskasia, who Yudke? And Alma Diaskasia is Gudke. So for example, just for a moment, a teacher teaches you and gives you a lecture. If the teacher condenses it to a way which you understand, guess what? You're not getting the essence of the teacher. You're getting it because he's speaking, but you don't really understand the way he understands it, right? But in order to communicate, he needs to lower his intellect in order to teach it properly. Another example.
That's the Indian of Tzimtzum, right?
That's the of Tzimtzum. Baruch Ato Hashem, Yoitzer, one second. Yoitzer Oir Uvoyre Choshech. He's created light, Yotzer Oir Uvoyre Choshech, and creates darkness. Now wait a second. Which world, Avi, is higher? Bria or Yetzira? Avi, what do you think?
Bria is higher.
Thank you. So if Bria is higher, it shouldn't say Borei Choshech, it should say Borei Or. And it shouldn't say Yoitzer Or, it should say Yoitzer Choshech. Has anyone ever thought about this? Every day you daven. Every single day of the year we say this. Yoitzer Or Uboyre Choshech. Chassidus does explain it. Chassidus says, because, like Avi said, Bria is a higher world than Yetzirah, so the revelations of Bria are too high for this world. How does it express itself? Through darkness. It's dark, meaning we don't have access to it. Yoitzer, the world of Yetzirah, which is lower, we have more access to, hence we say Yoitzer Or. And that's why, which tefillin do we touch when we say Yoitzer Or Uboyre Choshech? When we say Yoitzer Or, we
Yad.
The Yad, and Uboyre Choshech we do the Shel Rosh, which is halachically more kedusha, has more holiness. The Rosh has more kedusha than the Yad, right? We have our local sefer here, so that's the pshat. Why do you touch your tefillin by Yoitzer Or, your tefillin Shel Yad? Because it's lower. Why do we touch our tefillin Shel Rosh by Uboyre Choshech? Because that's an experience from a higher level, but because it's higher, therefore the way it comes down is through Choshech. So these are examples that to explain this concept over here in Tanya, that the Yud-K, being that it's the two first letters of God's the tetragrammaton, the name of Yud-K, Yud-K Vav-K, the name equal 86, it's much greater and much higher. But because of that, the way it manifests itself is through not being seen. It's not nira v'nigla, as the Alter Rebbe says. So let's see how he develops the thought further. V'zeh shekosov, back into the text. V'zeh shekosov, ashrei hagever asher tiyasreno yud-kei. It says in the Pasuk, fortunate is man who's been punished, tiyasreno yud-kei. Why does it say asher tiyasreno yud-kei? Says the Alter Rebbe, because punishment, yisurim, torch, pain, comes from Yud-Kei. That's why the rabbis say, the sages say in the Gemara, Ki asmechem b'yisurim, those people that accept their yisurim, b'simcha aleim hakosav v'yimer, upon them. The verse says, when the verse says the following, it refers to those that accept their yisurim b'simcha. Quote, v'oyavov, and those that are beloved to him, beloved to God, kitseis hashemesh. It's similar to when the sun comes out, bigvurasoi, in its potency, when it's very hot. So in other words, when it's very hot, it's uncomfortable. Says the Pasuk, but that's when you have the intensity of the heat from the shemesh. which alludes to Hashem, right? Kishemesh umogin Hashem Elokim. So normally, Moshe, there's a nartik, there's a cover on the sun, and therefore it's a little cooler. So there, Chassidus says that's when you experience Elokim covering up Yud Kei Vav Kei. When Hashem takes out the sun in its potency, meaning without the cover, that's the Yud Kei Vav Kei being experienced over the Elokim. And who gets that? V'oyavov. And the pasuk calls them my beloved, and Hashem calls them v'oyavov, my lovers. Why? Because they love me even in the state of Mekablim Yisurim. They accept the Yisurim bi'ava. Now the Alter Rebbe here gives us a logical reason. In other words, he gives us some thought. He quotes the verses. Now he says, Ki simcha himeya avosai. Why do I have simcha? Avram, why do I have simcha from pain? Why am I happy? Because you have simcha from God's love that He's showing to you, Kirvas Hashem, that you're the closest to God, Yoser mikol chaya elam hazeh, more than all physical matter. You can have gashmias and more gashmias, and you think God really loves me. Says the Alter Rebbe in chapter 26. You know when He really loves you? When and if, for whatever reason, you're makabel, yisurim bi'ava. That shows that you really love Him, not you love the gashmias. In other words, how do we know when someone loves Hashem because of gashmias? How do we know? How do you know that's genuine? And the answer is we don't. We don't. The proof is in the pudding. You could love. It's easy to love God when you have the gashmias. You have olam hazeh. But when you have yisurim and you love Hashem, what does that show? That you love Him. Because you can't say that you love the situation. The situation, stinks. It's terrible. It's painful. Awful. So if someone is in that state of Yisurim, and he loves, what does that show? That his Ava is because he is Kirvas Hashem. He's with the Yud Kei, not with the Vav Kei. Kidichsiv, as it says, quoting Tehillim, I think it's today's Shir, or whatever, not today's Shir. Ki toiv chazdecha mechayim. David HaMelech says, it is better for me, your chazdecha, your chesed, mechayim, from life. What does that mean? I'm alive. Moshe, I'm alive. I have everything going fine. I have life. Says David HaMelech, Ki toiv chazdecha. Your chesed, God, is even better than chayim, than life. Based on what we said before, it makes sense that you accept Hashem even b'yisurim, even when it's no good. That shows that you really love Him, not you love the situation. V'kirvas Hashem hi b'yesel se'eis, and this closeness to God is more umaylein kates and Adam for nightim greater b'alma diskasya in the concealed world kishom chevya uzay, for over there is the strength, the potency of His love, the Yeshiv b'seised elyon, and He sits in the a supernal concealed state, v'al kain, and because this is your attitude towards God, zeichel etzeis Hashemes, therefore you will merit, the person who has this attitude will merit that the sun will come out b'gvurosa in its potency, l'osad lavi when Mashiach comes, Shehu Yitzias Chama Nartika, the sun will come out of its cover, of its shield, She Mechusa Boy Beilam Hazeh, which is right now covered in the physical world, also then in the future, Tizgale, it will be revealed, Miksuya from its cover, the Ainu, Sha'oz Yizgale Almed Iskasya, then will be revealed the concealed world, V'yizrach, and it will shine, V'yoyed, and it will illuminate, Begilui Rabba Otzim, with a great manifestation, to all those that shield themselves in this God, in the physical world, and they shield themselves in God's shade. Tzeil HaChochma, referring to the shade of wisdom, Shuprinas Tzeil, which is only a shade. Listen, a shade, when the sun is baking, the sun is shining, it creates a shade. So you would think that a shade is ancillary. It's not the sun itself, it's a shade. That's the point he's making. That in the shade, which is in the darkness, compared to the light of the sun, that's where you have the essence of God more than in the revealed state of the sun. When Mashiach will come, both will come together. You'll have the sun coming out without its cover, and it'll have it all. Now, before we go further, what do we understand from this? What do we understand from this? It's a very heavy recipe. I told you. It's a heavy recipe because a normal person, has a hard time accepting tzaras, And yes, people say, especially, God forbid, when someone is ill and, towards the end of their life, you see sometimes people that are able to accept their yisurim, their pain, their end-of-life situation with more simcha and some with less simcha. But I think, and the Alter Rebbe here, I think what catches me is the Alter Rebbe's logic. Where he says, Ki asimcha hi me'ava me'avosoi kirvas Hashem yoseh mikol chaya olam hazeh. Those words and that line is the philosophy that gives us the ability to appreciate tzaras. If one knows, and again, we know this because, we believe. You don't believe, you don't believe. But if you believe that there is a higher world, there's a higher layer of reality, and normally we don't tap into that reality. What we experience daily and weekly and monthly and yearly is the doings, the makings of the world. Everyone in every situation. And then there's a situation where God, for his infinite wisdom, like if you're going to ask me why, the Alter Rebbe doesn't address why. You know why? Because he's not God, and he doesn't. And no one knows why. You all know Eli Wiesel, said, and the Rebbe also wrote it in a letter. Anyone who tries to explain and justify God with the Holocaust is a fool. Like, they say the Satmar Rav, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, in the 48, 49, one of those years, he went to see the previous Rebbe. Shortly after he came, a few years, and the previous Rebbe was still alive. And he said disparaging words why God brought the Holocaust, because of the assimilation in Europe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, again, I wasn't there, I heard that the Frierdiker Rebbe said, don't try to justify God. Just be quiet. Don't, but, so why this happens that a person who's passing away has to go through suffering? Pass away. You have to suffer. And what we see and what we hear, of suffering is terrible. It's really so unbearable. And yet other people pass away without suffering. But the Nakuda isn't just suffering, just Holocaust. The Nakuda is a mother is shot. It's any tragedy. What did she do that at 42 years old, she shot, murdered Nachman Litzlan and leaves over 3 children? What did she do? Was she such a big sinner? I'm sure not. She was, I'm sure, an Isha Tzadekis, a righteous woman. We will never understand that. And even if we try to understand it, we're just foolish. We're going on the wrong trajectory, and we're going to be very angry, you know. So the Alter Rebbe, 1 second, Issa, give me 1 second. The Alter Rebbe is not dealing with the why. Yeah, like I always say, if I would write a book with a title, "Don't Play God." Don't want to be God. Just leave God to be God. But nevertheless, what happens, we have a right and an obligation to understand in the sense of what can we do with it. So the Alter Rebbe just now tells us when we have anxiety from Bona Chayim, Zoyne, children, health, and Parnosa, which are real, not everything else which is foolish. You get anxious about this or that. Come on. But real issues, says the Alter Rebbe, for whatever reason, God is sending you a very high revelation and opportunity and wants to see if you are in love with Him or are you in love with what He does for you. So this is a very, it's like, wow, you're telling me if I cannot accept God's punishment and God's throwing me the curveball, then my entire avodah really is an expression of my egotism. That's in a way what comes from these words here, and that's why it's very, very, heavy. Now, Isser, go ahead. Isser.
I just wanted to share it. I shared it with Moshe that I think Ram Emanuel said, "Never let a tragedy go to waste." And, it's true in politics, but it's true in Yiddishkeit too. And, so we have these themes of sneas and technology and lace shaitels and skirt lengths. And so every time there's something, there's a kol korah or there's a kinos or there's a, and so Moshe says, like, what's the mitzvah of our generation is, how about being nice to each other? But there seems to be this need for people to say, "Oh, this happened because of," and they use that as a soapbox to spread whatever message they want to spread.
Okay.
The flavor of the day.
Yeah.
Whether it's shaitels or technology or
Lashon
hara.
I hear you and I understand what you're saying, but I want to ask you, Chavre, have you? I mean, this is not the first time you're learning this. How have you processed this? This is a serious. It's a very serious piece in Kanye here, which deals with our reality. This isn't. Am I going to daven better or not daven better? We're talking here about when we have a situation which is very worrisome, anxiety-ridden. How do you accept that? How do you deal with it? Ki toiv chazdecha mechayim, David HaMelech says. Kirvas Hashem. Are you interested in the kirvas of Hashem? In other words, if we don't accept that this is kirvas Hashem, I can understand why you would reject the argument. But if you do accept that there's a Yudke and a Vavke, Iskasya and Iskal, there's another reality, another dimension. What we're saying here is that when there's trouble, this is an expression of a higher reality. That's a heavy, heavy thought. And frankly, I'm not sure if anyone before the Alter Rebbe said this in the way he says it. In other words, you might say, well, look into, the Rambam and Ramban, but he's not just saying it as an emunah. That's what I'm trying to explain over and over. This isn't just emunah. The Alter Rebbe is making a logical argument. Are you in love with God or are you in love with yourself? Okay, Chevra, I have I have to go to another shiur. Sei gesund.
Okay,
See everyone tomorrow, okay? Have to go. Bye-bye. Take care.